We are here with Shaping the Basin, and we've taken it on the road. Jared and I have an awesome opportunity to visit Stefan Savides. Most people don't know that right here in the Klamath Basin, we have a world-renowned artist whose sculptures can be found all over the world, and you live here in Klamath. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. This is really a treat. I don't get to show off so much in my own home, so I'll take advantage of this opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's just start with why your stuff is all over the world. So why Klamath?
Well, I moved to Klamath Falls for one simple reason: the birds. The wildlife here is, well, a lot of people live here and don't realize it, but this is an amazing mecca for migratory waterfowl. And I came originally to the basin in 1966 was the first year I came here on a hunting trip. I not only fell in love with the waterfowl, which is the reason I came, I also fell in love with the high desert. And it's full of life. And while it looks kind of barren, sagebrush and juniper trees, it abounds with life. And so those two things sucked me in, and here I am,
Mm-hmm. And you do sculptures now, but you started as a taxidermist.
I did. I was fascinated with birds from day one. My earliest childhood memories that I can think way back, maybe 5 years old, 4, all had birds in them. And when I was a young kid, I grew up in the Bay Area, California, and spent a lot of time in San Francisco visiting family. And one of the things that I did when I was there was to go to the Academy of Science building in Golden Gate Park. And I don't know if you've ever been there, but it was an amazing museum filled with these big dioramas with glass fronts and mammals and birds and snakes and lizards all mounted in there like frozen in time. And I spent many hours like glued to the glass looking in there. And I was old enough to realize that they just didn't crawl in there and die, that somebody actually made them. And so when I was in the 6th grade, I had a really interesting science teacher, and I asked him if he knew somebody that can show me how to do that. And sure enough, he did, and connected me with a retired preacher that did very crappy taxidermy, but still was willing to share what he knew with me, and spent a few hours. I had this little book, and I could take them apart and view this book, but I didn't feel comfortable putting them back together. And he helped me with that. And that's when I was 12. At age 16, I was teaching taxidermy to adults through the city of Vacaville's recreation department. At age 18, I came to the Klamath Basin, and that was moved to Tule Lake and set up a taxidermy shop in the picking plant there, and never looked back.
Okay.
Had just kept going, and I basically worked my way to the top of my profession nationally and internationally in taxidermy, which afforded me wonderful excursions around the world and so forth. And anyways, it's I feel insanely blessed that my life has taken me in so many wonderful directions.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned you've traveled all over the place. Where's the coolest place you've been?
Well, I was fortunate enough to be commissioned by Mr. and Mrs. Cabela, the founders of Cabela's, and I became their personal field taxidermist. And so they, on their hunting safaris, they would take me along, and my job was to take care of their avian trophies in the field. And so I think probably that trip, we spent, 6 weeks in Ethiopia, some of the most primitive areas I've ever seen in my life. And I think that would probably be the top of that list, maybe.
That's pretty cool.
It-
Cabela is a name that most people would recognize, and you'll do that. That's pretty neat that you did it. How many birds did you taxidermy during those 6 weeks?
well, I can say in 3 African excursions, I brought back around 550 bird skins, most of which we mounted some for their stores, and most of them went for their personal collection, and including um, everything from little tiny finches to huge African vultures and herons and hawks and eagles and owls and ducks and geese, and I mean, you name it. We were chasing them around.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
What made you change, or do you still do taxidermy? I guess that would be one question.
No, I actually consider myself a recovering taxidermist.
Okay. So when and what drew you to switch from taxidermy to sculpting?
Well, I realized probably 30 years ago that if you really wanted to make my mark on the world of wildlife art, taxidermy is not it. Probably the problem with taxidermy is that it's easily damaged. Bugs can eat up a piece, could fall off the wall and break, or your dog can chew it up, and just the ambient light in a home can fade them. And so there's a lot of things that will deteriorate a mount over the years. And unless they're kept in a dark environment under glass and so forth, they really don't have a long life. So I thought, what better subject or better medium would be bronze? Oh, and you can start as anything, but this one starts as a clay model. Then it gets molded in silicone rubber, and then it gets cast in wax. And then the wax gets sent to the foundry. That gets invested in plaster. Wax gets melted out of the plaster, then bronze gets poured into the plaster, then the plaster gets cracked off the bronze, and then we get all the pieces. So this is the metal portion, the metal shop portion of the studio. His job is to take the raw pieces of metal and cut these sprues off here and clean up any flaws. He does all of this, preps the metal and puts it all together and makes them happen. So she's adding different chemicals, and depending on the temperature and the mixture of the chemicals and the way she applies them as to how it turns out. So each piece, there's a mold. We only cast X amount from that mold, and then when it's done, we can destroy the mold and no more will be created. I kind of tease clients when they purchase one of our bronze pieces. I tell them, I said, by the way, this comes with a 5,000-year warranty. And seriously, that piece could be still here 5,000 years from now. So it's one of the most lasting medium you could actually create art in. And so having 53 years of taxidermy behind me and looking at design and composition and attitudes and motion and emotion and all those things that I put into a piece of taxidermy, I could just incorporate in bronze. And so I didn't really step in at the bottom floor when I went from taxidermy to bronze in terms of just producing the work, but also in terms of selling it as well, because a lot of my taxidermy clients also collected bronze sculpture. So it was an easy transition for them. They go, well, maybe we'd like to see what, we'd like to get a piece of yours or whatever. And so in regard to that, Mr. and Mrs. Cabela were building their dream home, which was 53,000 square feet. And they had, mountains and plains and rivers and all of the stuff with taxidermy in there. They also wanted to do all custom fixtures for their kitchens and their bathrooms. And so I sculpted bronze bathroom fixtures and toilet paper holders and beer taps and faucets and towel racks, and all in bronze and different motifs and so forth, in terms of animals and so forth. So it all just fit perfectly for me.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. How do you, I mean, it feels like with taxidermy, the animal is the animal and that's what it's going to look like. But with sculpture, you have to have an idea and then you transform it into something. Can you walk us through a little bit of that process?
Sure. Well, the interesting about taxidermy is every piece that I've done has been a commission. Somebody hunts this particular bird, thinks it's worthy of hanging on their wall. They bring it to me. I try to make it look like the bird before they shot it. In bronze, well, let me back up just a little bit. In taxidermy, our goal is to make it as flawlessly perfect as possible, because you're working with a skin that's either rotting or drying. And either one of those things is a problem when you're trying to make it look right. And so the goal is to make it as perfect, every feather in its place, every anatomy just perfect, no problems. And in sculpture, you're working with a medium that you can do anything with. And if you know the subject really well, you could make it absolutely perfect. You can carve and sculpt every feather exactly where you want it to be, every line in every feather. And, so in sculpture, you really go the other direction, because if you do that, what you've created is a bronze piece of taxidermy. And some people try to do that. And if they're sculpting a mallard, they use a green patina for the head and so forth and so on. To me, my goal was not to create bronze taxidermy. And what I wanted to do in bronze was to capture the energy and the essence of a particular bird with minimal detail. And I like to suggest feather groups rather than put every feather in there. It's just, it's kind of the opposite. And it's so difficult coming from that background of taxidermy to loosen up. Feathers on birds, when a wing is opened, I don't make them everyone perfect. I make them that there's wind blowing on it, and there's things are somewhat askew. And it's really that's been a tough road to get to that point, and to suggest it instead of showing it in all detail.
I'm remembering my high school art teacher that told me, quit trying to be perfect because nature is not perfect. And so, I think there was a rule about not doing things in pairs and that sort of thing. That's what it makes me think of, that your eye suggests. I remember my art teacher saying that.
Well, it's certainly, I excelled in taxidermy because I looked at it as an art form.
Mm-hmm.
Technically, my birds were pretty well formed anatomically and so forth, but my focus was really to create art with them, and all the principles that apply in a painting: design, composition, color schemes, attitude, and motion, and all those things you can employ in taxidermy. And that's what really carried me because of my art background. And so, and I want to touch on my art background. I was waiting for you to ask me, so how did you get into art?
I'm
Was
getting
that one
ready
of your
to. It
questions?
is one of my questions.
I thought so.
I kind of also wanted to know when you identified yourself as an artist, because I think some people dabble about it, but I wanted to know how you got into it, and then when you the light bulb clicked on and you said, I'm an artist.
Well, I start at the beginning, if you like. No, I was extremely fortunate to have a mother who was an artist, and her art form was floral arranging, but it was a three-dimensional process. And when I was 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, still living at under my mother's roof, um, I would do these taxidermy compositions, mount the bird, and then I put a piece of driftwood in there, and I'd go out and find some dried material, and I'd plunk it in there and create these little arrangements. Only like hers, I tried to copy hers. Only mine had a bird for the focal point. Hers had flowers. So I could create this all. I go, "What do you think, Mom?" And she goes, "Well, it's not too bad, but take that out of there and get rid of this. And you've got too many different forms. To simplify, only have two forms, and you've got too many colors. Take those out, and that color doesn't go with this." And she would dissect this thing by the time she was done, and it always looked better. So living there, I really got to experience not only my mother's direct corrections, but living in a household where she had a never-ending parade of floral designs. And as you know, flower arrangements, if you use fresh flowers, they're good for a handful of days, and then, another one will appear. And she studied also. She taught flower arranging, and she was a state fair judge in flower arranging, and she studied under I don't know if you're familiar with the Japanese school of Ikebana, which is the very simplistic presentations, very simple lines, lots of negative space, very simple and powerful. And she employed that in her arrangements. And I got it through osmosis by living in that home. And so I attribute all my success in terms of design and my art to my mother.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
What a legacy for her to leave. And then was she able to enjoy your works and watch your success?
In taxidermy. And I did do some painting. I painted for duck stamp competitions, and I did wood carvings and things. But to go back to your question about when did I realize I was an artist, there was never a profound moment. In high school, without even thinking or trying or making an effort, I won the art award. I was awarded for my artistic endeavors, and so essentially, I never said to myself, "I want to be an artist for a living." I merely followed the path of least resistance. I was making money, creating art. There was no reason to look anywhere else. And so that's how it went. And one door opened, and then the next door opened, and I just kept walking through them. I've never had a job working for anybody else, which makes it a little bit of a problem for me because I have employees now. I have no idea what it's like to be on the other side of that fence.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, my lovely bride, Irina, coaches me a little bit because she has spent a lifetime working for other people. But essentially never woke to an alarm clock to go to work, never commuted anywhere to go to work. Consequently, I'm not very regimented. I've never had to be, and it's still a problem. I do brush my teeth every day, but beyond that, I don't know if I have much routine.
That seems like an artist thing. That feels like an artist thing.
Yeah, I guess.
And now we are fortunate in Klamath to have several of your pieces around town. And I don't know if everyone would recognize that. So talk to us about some of your pieces that are here in Klamath that you've done.
Well, I am very fortunate that Klamath has really opened their arms to me and welcomed my art. It's really a wonderful thing to have a community behind you and saying, "Oh my God, we want more. We love what you do, and we want more." And it doesn't get any better than that. So I can't thank the people behind all this art enough. Um, but as far as the pieces, I think the first piece that I ever did for Klamath, public piece, was the mobile of hanging birds in the hospital in the middle of their atrium stairwell. And that was an interesting piece because obviously I don't have a 40-foot high studio, so I never saw the piece completed until it was installed. I configured it all and cut all the stainless steel supports and birds and fashioned everything, and was hoping it was going to look okay once we put it up, and consequently it did. So I'm quite pleased. The next piece was the Pelican downtown, and just ecstatic to have. Do you drive by and go, geez, here I am. And those were the beginnings, and I just really, they're all quite different. The Grebes in Putnam Point, that was an idea that I had presented actually to the hospital for the roundabout piece. I gave them 3 different designs, and they chose the piece that's installed there now. But the Grebe idea was perfect for Putnam Point. I didn't realize, to be honest with you, I lived here, and I'm all about birds, and I didn't realize the importance of Putnam Point in terms of people coming to see those grebes doing their dance and so forth. And so couldn't have been a better location. We have some pieces now that are projected to be installed, a very large eagle for the roundabout at 140 in Homedale. And I just got some word today that we're looking, we've had many install dates that have come and gone, but they're promising that end of April, first part of May now, as I just been informed that. So hopefully soon that piece will be installed. And I really feel like this one's going to be probably have the most wow factor in terms of it. It's going to be almost 18 feet tall, and this huge eagle on a pedestal base. So anyway, looking forward to that. And we have an elk slated for the Baldwin Park, which I don't think too many people realize, but that hillside next to the Baldwin Hotel is going to be turned into a beautiful park. Mm-hmm. So we have a piece for that. And we're working on a piece the design-wise and of a Native woman in a native dugout canoe harvesting wokus, and with some school of suckers and maybe salmon or whatever. Could be quite an interesting piece, but it's in the very beginnings of design and so forth. But it's just been a wonderful opportunity to put myself out there, and I'm jumping to it.
Said I'm all about it. Yeah, I'm all about it. Said I'm all about it. Yeah, 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 yeah. Said I'm all about it. Yeah, I'm all about it. Said I'm all about it. Yeah, 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 yeah.
If a picture says 1,000 words, imagine the story. 24 frames a second can tell about your business. 40 Deuce Films.
Where, if people were traveling, where else could they see your work in public places?
Well, I have a few pieces across the country. I have an installation in outside of St. Louis on the river, on a refuge there on the river there. I have a piece that's at elk piece, life-size elk at the in front of the headquarters of the San Luis National Wildlife Refuge, and that's in Los Banos, California. We have another piece, a pelican in flight, in a museum in Nixon, Nevada. A public piece, two public pieces in now the name just by Charleston, Mount Pleasant, South Carolina,
Okay.
at a riverside park there where the river meets the ocean. Pieces in there's also pieces in Somerville, South Carolina,
Okay.
and public piece in Dubuque, Iowa, a big eagle piece that we did. And there might be another one or two, but
Oh,
some installations in some museums and so forth. These are brand new pieces here. We just debuted this one in San Antonio.
Okay. How much does this weigh? How do you transport them? When you take them to San Antonio, how do they get there?
I put them in a big crate that sits on a pallet, and we move it with a forklift. And that one got shipped. It got tied in on its side, and all these pieces got supported.
How long does it take you to do something like this?
People ask me that, and I can't answer it because I don't clock in. I told you I don't have any any routine in my life. So some days I'll work on a piece, and then there's goes through weeks that I don't even touch it, and then may work a whole day, maybe work a couple hours. And if we embark upon a project, I can pretty much, from the time we sign the contract to ready to install, I can usually figure 12 months.
I think it's just so neat that you're here in our backyard and then your work is all over the world, literally. So that's pretty neat. Why do you think art is important to a community?
Oh, well, let me ask you. When you drive into a community and you start seeing public art pieces here and there, what does it do for you? What do you feel?
It makes me want to stop there and check it out and learn more.
And
I love it.
yeah, and my feeling is that when I see that, it makes me feel that, geez, the people that live here really love their community, because those don't just automatically appear. There's a lot of energy to generate the money and to figure out the ins and outs and where you're going to put it and who's going to put it up and all the things. I mean, it's a major undertaking. And so people have to really love it to go through those steps to make that happen. So, I mean, it makes a statement that you can't deny. And I just got back from a showing. We are part of, we've been invited for the last dozen years to a museum showing in San Antonio, the Briscoe Western Art Museum, and they have a weekend where they invite about 60 or 70 artists from around the country, and they do quite a opening reception. And of course, it's right on the Riverwalk of San Antonio, and if you've ever been there, it's an amazing endeavor. But there's art all over. That whole Riverwalk is filled with art, and it just makes a statement that no other thing does.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. I think it definitely helps lend itself to the culture of a place and the identity of a place. So
Yeah,
I think
it
it's
sure
important.
does. Absolutely.
And I look at all the art we have downtown. We have your sculptures, but I even think about the paintings on the light boxes downtown. Actually, I one of the things that the first time I ever learned about your work was in our building, the Pelicans.
Right.
You
yeah.
you designed the Pelicans, and then other artists
Painted them.
painted them, decorated them in one way or another. And that was the first time I learned about you.
Mm.
And I love that collaboration too. Your piece, but someone else painting them is fun
Yeah.
too.
No, that was a fun project. I actually got to paint one myself too. That I think is ended. U.S. Fish and Wildlife, I think, purchased it or
Okay.
whatever. And guess what I painted on there?
Birds. What was it about? I have to ask, what was it about birds? I know you talked about all of your memories were birds, but what is it about birds
just
that
fascinated me from day one. And my mother obviously felt that fascination. And instead of, when I was Cub Scout age, instead of enrolling me in the Cub Scouts, at that time, the Audubon Society had a program called the Junior Audubon Society. And my mother became a junior Audubon den mother, so to speak. And so it was a little group of myself and 2 or 3 friends. And she got all the curriculum from the Audubon Society and conducted this junior Audubon club. And I don't know, just fascinated with them. I've surrounded myself with them in my home. I moved to this location where I'm at. And 2 things. One, I wanted to be somewhat close to town with a rural atmosphere, but I wanted to be where the birds flew. And when I looked at the current property that I live in now, I was looking at it during this exact month. It was April, and the geese here that are here in the basin during April are everywhere. And I remember talking to the owner of the property and saying, "Well, I'm very interested in your property. However, do these geese come with the deal?" And she said yes. And so I thought, that's it, I'm going to buy it. But seriously, I surround myself with wildlife, and it inspires pieces. A lot of pieces that I've sculpted come right from out my living room window, watching the birds that I've attracted here.
I think sometimes people that live here take it for granted. I think that we can become numb to how many birds are here. But I know sitting in the visitor center and people coming in, people travel from all over the world to see the birds that we have here.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We don't realize how unique it is until you get out and about and see lots of places where there aren't birds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for people who are budding artists?
Yeah, there's a huge membership in the Starving Artist Club. And the reason there is because most of us artists have this brain that creates this art, but we don't know what to do with it. Don't know how to market it, how to convince somebody that they can't live without it. Don't want to give that piece away to somebody else because we want to make all the money. So advice, I always say, and I've taught some sculpture classes and have had students. I've taught lots of taxidermy classes, and people would come to me and they would say, "Well, do you think I can make a living doing taxidermy?" And I would promptly answer, "Absolutely. But if you fail, it's not because you're a crappy taxidermist. It's because you're a crappy business person." And it's the same with a budding artist. You have to give it your 110%. You got to really, you just got to be excited about what you do, and you got to immerse yourself in it. But you'll never get anywhere if nobody knows you're there, and you can't sell your work. And I've gone to numerous art shows across the country, And there are some amazing artists, and with highly regarded as artists. And they go to these shows and they can't sell anything. They sit there, maybe put an easel up and paint a little bit, and so they can think that might be interesting. But what it does is it isolates them from the people. The people don't want to talk to them because they don't want to interrupt them. They don't get that. They make some very stupid mistakes. Some people, they just can't sell themselves. Like myself, I'm so shy that I have to really work it. No,
Oh, yeah, I got that feeling from you.
No, but I mean, essentially, when you're selling your art, you're selling yourself.
Mhm.
And that's what I tell a budding artist, is to make yourself interesting enough, make yourself connect with the people. I've gone to art shows this last weekend. We had set up a beautiful show. And when the show started at 7:00 in the evening, so did the music come blaring out of these speakers. And I had to go and say, hey, I know I'm always bitching about one thing or another, but I got one more thing to bitch about, is how am I supposed to sell art with this blasting music coming out of here? I can't talk. They can't hear. I can't hear. We can't form a connection. And that's what art sales is about, is forming a connection. And when a person makes a connection with you and they like what they see in your art and in your person, they want to go home with a little piece of you, and they can do that by purchasing a piece. And it's basic stuff, but a lot of people don't get that.
I love in doing this podcast and talking to people, almost every person I've interviewed has come back to the importance of connection and relationships. And I just love that.
Absolutely true. It's building relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're represented by 8 galleries across the country, from Bluffton, which is just outside of Hilton Head, and Charleston, South Carolina as well, Jackson, Wyoming, Fredericksburg, Texas, Whitefish, Montana, Colorado Springs, Colorado, and Ashland, Oregon. Finally got one on the West Coast. But what they are an extension for you, and they build relationships with the people that purchase. And they're very good at it, the ones that really know what they're doing. And we pay large commissions for them to sell our work, but I pay it with a smile, because I know that sale would have never happened if that gallery didn't exist, and if those people did not know how to make a connection with a particular buyer or collector. And so a lot of pieces have to fall into place for it to work. To make a living at art,
Mm-hmm.
not what the average person does. And I was just talking earlier about, I don't have a steady income. I don't know if I'm going to make $15,000, $20,000 in a month or $5,000 in a month. You don't know what you're going to sell. So you don't go financially out on a limb. You keep you keep yourself pretty solvent.
Sure.
And if you can do that, it's a huge plus.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty
Yeah.
neat. Thinking about the way you just worded that, I just think back to your connection when you were 18, coming here to the Klamath Basin, and now you're here creating art and blessing us in the community with having some of your pieces all over. So thank you for that.
It's wonderful.
But
It's a real pleasure to be here. And thank you so much for taking the time today to poke at me a little bit.
yeah, well, thank you for giving me your time. I have 3 these are like hot seat questions. They're going to be a little different than I've asked my other guests, but do you have a piece that is your favorite piece? What's the word? Piece de resistance. I know I'm going to mess up the sound, but what is it?
I don't have a piece, but every once in a while, there's a piece that I don't keep every piece that I do. And we make it limited editions. And when we get to the end of the edition, and most of our smaller pieces are editions of 35 or so, we might make an encore piece, which we call a artist's proof, and make another one or two maybe after the edition is sold. But most of the pieces I don't keep for myself. For one thing, is my house isn't big enough, and two, there's some that I just, every piece that I do, I put everything I know about design and composition and emotion and emotion and motion and all the principles of art. And not all do I feel like I make the mark on. Some just seem to fall short. Now I see that. Other people see all the things that I did right about it. And so, but every once in a while, there's one that when I finish, I go, yes. And those are the ones I'm liable to keep. And, but there's no just one of those.
Mm-hmm.
I could name a few of them, but you wouldn't know what I'm talking about because there's no image here to go with it. But did we talk about naming pieces?
No, but let's talk about that for a minute. How do you name the pieces? You were telling me about one of them. You were explaining the bird, but
Yes.
tell me how you name your pieces.
Well, usually when I embark upon the project, I'm already starting to think of names, and I have a little sheet of paper there as I'm sculpting this thing. And as a name comes across, I write it down. I also employ other artists, friends of mine. Once the piece is formed enough that you can see the energy of the piece, and I send them photos and say, hey, what do you think about this one? Names. So I welcome all that. I've even on Facebook asked my Facebook audience to give me names and so forth. But I think the names are really important. It gives them a real identity. And I like to make names that are kind of catchy and make people smile when they see them. And not all of them are that way, but some of them. For instance, the kingfisher piece, if you know what kingfishers do, they're fish eaters. And so I have one that's called All Catch and No Release. Just have a little mama duck with some babies behind, and call that one Ducks in a Row. Things, those are just kind of warm-hearted kind of titles. We did a chicken in a bucket, and the bucket is all beat up and just bashed in and whatever. And I've asked a friend of mine, a sculptor friend, I said, what would you think about for a name on this piece? And he goes, well, looking at the bucket, I'd call it low-income housing. And I went, yeah, that's funny, but I don't think I can do that. But we ended up with home is where you find it. And so that works for everyone. So that's how the names come about. And like I said, I think they're really important.
You did the pelicans at Klamath Commons, correct?
That's correct.
Does that have a name?
That one does. It's called, and that's not as catchy as most of mine, but it's Tres Pescadores, which is 3 fishermen in Spanish.
Oh, very
And
neat.
so that one works.
Mhm.
There's a little heron at the Sugarman's Corner Park. We did the pelicans on the wall there as well, the
Yeah.
bright colored pelicans.
Okay.
But in the park is a school of fish
Mm-hmm.
and the heron. And the heron, it's more of a serious name. They are truly, if you know their habits, they're truly opportunists. And so that one's simply called Opportunist.
Neat.
It's just,
Do you have a favorite bird?
no, I don't. And most unlikely, I really am drawn to seabirds. I like gulls, which a lot of people, they're pests and they're crap on their boats and whatever. I just think they're just amazing birds. And if I could come back as a bird, I'd come back as a gull because they can fly with the greatest of ease. They can eat anything, and they swim quite gracefully. They can do all that there is to do out there. I just think they're beautiful birds. But can you hear that dove in the background?
I can.
Anyways, there's just so many of them. I don't have a favorite, but I love waterfowl.
Mhm. Well, besides your house, which I know the viewers or the people listening can't see this view, but besides here, where's your favorite place in Klamath County to see birds?
Oh, for birds? Well, I've always, some of my favorite spots, and it's actually not in Klamath County, it's just on the other side of the California line. As I said, I moved to Tule Lake when I was 18 and set up a taxidermy shop. There's heaps of what I would call childhood memories. Even though I was 18, I'm still a child, I guess. That just give me a very warm feeling when I go there. And it's been kind of sad lately because the refuge, which was teeming with life, has been void of life almost in these last few years. And I'm so pleased to see that the water is back and that the birds are coming back. But it's the memories that I had there from my early 20s and so forth was out of this world. The amount of birds there and all that was going on. It was just, so that's, when I want to go look at birds, I go there. And hopefully it's not only about the birds, but it's about them. It's about the history, my history there.
It's about the connection.
Yeah.
Back to that.
Did we mention that connections are really important?
We did, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Good.
It's an important one. I thank you for your time today. And I look forward to seeing what other artwork you create in our community. And thank you.
Well, it's been a slice of heaven. Thank you.